Now, they agree something needs to be done, but not what or how. 16 EU leaders met in Brussels on Sunday to try to reach a consensus on the migrant crisis ahead of a bloc-wide summit this week. Our correspondent Brian Carter is following the events closely, and he's joining us now live from Brussels. Brian, so what came out of that summit we were watching yesterday?
As you said, Tessa, there were a lot of declarations on the need to cooperate, on the need to work together, but there was no concrete decision. The meeting only lasted for about 4 hours, and there was only 16 member states that were present at this informal meeting. They agreed on some things that are not really politically sensitive, like the need to reinforce Europe's external borders, the need to work better with African countries where most of these migrants depart from, and the need to find a solution for those who are already in Europe and who have not been granted asylum. But the sticking point remains the reform of the Dublin regulation and what to do with the so-called secondary movement of migrants, as you will see in the video that I'm about to show you that will offer a quick recap of yesterday's meeting. 16 European leaders responded to Jean-Claude Juncker's call for an informal meeting on migration. All eyes were on Angela Merkel, who faces a political challenge at home because of her migration policy, and on Giuseppe Conte. His government adopted a hardline policy on migration, and the Italian Prime Minister came to Brussels with a plan to reform EU rules on the matter.
It's a plan that aims to completely overtake the Dublin regulation.
Under the Dublin regulation, the country responsible for an asylum application is the country where the asylum seeker first entered. Mediterranean countries have long argued that this regulation puts unequal burden on them. But reforming it seems to be a major stumbling block, and Italy's plan is not about to change that. The EU Commission and some EU leaders stressed that many other ideas were on the table and that a common European solution is needed.
On one side, you cannot leave the countries of origin on their own because it would mean that they'd have to solve all of the problems on their own. That's not a common solution. But on the other side, human traffickers and refugees cannot choose the country in which they want their asylum request to be processed. Which means here, too, we have to decide who is in charge of which responsibility.
While there was consensus on the need to reinforce Europe's external borders and increase cooperation with countries of origin, France's Emmanuel Macron insisted that refugees should be distinguished from what he calls economic migrants.
Our
challenge today is linked to the political pressure in some member states and to what we call secondary migrations in the EU, for those who entered in a country, asked for asylum, and then went to another country. And today we're not efficient enough to bring them to their country of origin, men and women who should not be granted asylum.
There was no mention of disembarkation platforms in external countries or of closed reception centers for migrants in Europe, a sign that many issues still need to be discussed ahead of this week's EU summit. Indeed, now everybody is looking to Thursday and Friday for an important European summit here in Brussels, where migration will be the most pressing issue on the table.
Yeah, indeed, Brian, as you say, we're looking to that big summit, but given how the situation is going into that summit, can we expect anything to come out of it at all?
Well, it depends on which side of the debate you stand on. Most leaders yesterday said they were happy and hopeful that an agreement could be found, but that was among 16 members, and you have 12 more that will be here on Thursday and Friday, including the 4 from the Visegrad group, that is Hungary, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Poland, who do not want to hear about refugees or asylum seekers or migrants in their country. Now, a solution has to be found on, as I said, the Dublin regulation and the secondary movement of migrants, but because they're so politically sensitive and time is of the essence, they will likely focus on issues that are less controversial, and the main of which is to stop the flow of migrants in the first place. Now, several solutions have been put on the table. One is to have so-called closed centers in Europe, in Mediterranean countries, where migrants could potentially stay for an extended period of time waiting for their asylum application to be examined. Another solution is so-called regional disembarkation platforms in third-party countries and African countries under the same principle. Now, European leaders insist that this can be done with respect to international law, law, that this can be done with the cooperation of the IOM and the UNHCR. But all these questions remain on the table, including the whether or not these African countries where these disembarkation platforms will or not accept to have them in their country. So as you can see, time is of the essence, time is ticking, and many EU leaders hope that they will find solutions in order to stop these anti-migrant forces across Europe that are using migration as a means to advance their political agenda. Tessa?
All right, thank you, Brian. Indeed, a big week in Brussels.